In what's become the longest-running battle in Russia's war against Ukraine, some estimate the running death toll as high as 1,000 per day. Despite heavy losses, Russia remains determined to take what's left of Bakhmut. This effort, however, has reduced what was once a thriving city of 70,000 to rubble. A predicted winter offensive never materialized, and with spring arriving, British intelligence suggests Russia is shifting to a defensive posture. Russia has not made any significant gains since July. One reason for that is Ukraine's elite Svoboda battalion, commanded by Petro Kuzyk. Commander Kuzyk says the Ukrainian forces have managed to hold out against far superior numbers, despite a shortage of ammunition. While Russia may take the city, analysts say with a cost of more than 10,000 dead, it's difficult to call that a win. Regardless, Commander Kuzyk believes his men will fight to the end.
How these two Russian fighter jets ended up in the water is not what you think. During her first combat mission since being commissioned, the Russian aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov was operating near Syria when she suffered multiple mishaps. On December 5, 2016, a $55 million Su-33 crashed into the Mediterranean Sea while attempting a second landing on the carrier. This was due to an arrestor cable snapping and the airplane rolled off the deck. The pilot managed to eject and was rescued without any injuries, but only a few weeks earlier, another incident had happened. On November 13, 2016, 3 Russian MiG-29Ks were returning from combat in Syria. The first pilot landed without any issues. The second MiG, however, broke the second arrestor cable, but managed to catch the fourth reserve cable and came to a stop. Unlucky for the third pilot, the second arrestor cable had severely tangled up with the third cable, forcing him to circle around. While the deck crew raced to untangle the cables, the MiG-29K eventually ran out of fuel and the pilot was forced to eject.
After murdering Alexei Navalny, Putin's now arresting those who are mourning his death. Several journalists have also been arrested, and the government warning people not to protest. Though in a direct defiance of Putin, the EU ambassador to Russia placed flowers on the monument in Moscow that remembers those killed by political repression. And the police keep removing flowers from the monument, but people keep placing even more. And across the nation, small groups of people have been gathering around monuments dedicated to victims of Stalin and the Soviet Union's repression. Police are clashing with protesters nearly everywhere as they attempt to block off memorials. Across Europe, protests have broken out, and Americans are expected to take to the streets across the country tonight as well. As for many, it very much feels like the last bastion of hope for a free Russia died today. If you're not Russian, Russia will kill you. If you are Russian, Russia will also kill you. It's a dictatorship of terror only mirrored by Stalin's regime. But one thing is clear though, Putin is terrified of his own people. And the sooner more Russians realize this, the sooner they will be free. But follow to stay in the loop. The United States just struck more than 85 Iranian targets with more than 125 missiles. 2 B-1 bombers took off from the United States this morning and flew non-stop to the region to participate in the raid on Iraq and Syria, in addition to numerous other local aircraft, including the A-10. They hit the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and their proxies command and control center, intel areas, rockets, missiles, UAVs, logistics, munitions, as well as other strategic sites. The Jordanian Air Force also joined the operation and struck several targets too, saying this is in solidarity with the United States. And President Biden said the U.S. doesn't see conflict in the Middle East or anywhere else in the world, but let all those who seek to do us harm know this: if you harm an American, we will respond. And he says that more airstrikes are coming, with officials saying these strikes were aimed at destroying their supply chain. Several militias are reporting that their headquarters have been completely destroyed, and some are reporting significant casualties. And the airstrikes are apparently still ongoing as you're hearing this. And like I said, this is just the beginning. So with everything still developing, follow to stay in the loop.
Everyone already knows that the Russian Air Force has already lost at least half of its famous Ka-52 attack helicopters since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. For example, on the very first day of the invasion, at the airfield of the Ukrainian city of Hostomel, these helicopters were shot down by old Soviet man-pads, which at that time were in the hands of the Ukrainian defense forces. Subsequently, further downings of these helicopters were recorded with some regularity. Among the latest events is the attack by ATACMS missiles on airfields in occupied Berdyansk and Luhansk, after which Russia lost another 7 Ka-52 helicopters destroyed and about 8 damaged. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to debunk myths about the best helicopters in the world.
The attacks lasted more than 7 hours. It began Sunday at 9:15 a.m. A ballistic missile fired from Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, landing in the waters near the cargo ship Unity Explorer. At 12 p.m., the USS Carney on patrol in the Red Sea when a drone launched from Yemen heads toward the Carney. The Navy crew shoots it down. At 12:35, the Unity Explorer under fire again. This time, the missile strikes the ship, while another drone is shot down as it heads towards the Carney. At 3:30 p.m., the cargo ship number 9 struck by a ballistic missile. 1 hour later, ballistic missile number 4 hits the cargo vessel Sophie. Again, the Carney racing to this cargo vessel to render aid as yet another drone is launched in the Carney's direction and shot down.
The U.S. and Iran are on the verge of war. Since just October 17th, the Pentagon says there have been at least 15 drone and rocket attacks on U.S. forces by Iranian proxies. And you have U.S. officials telling NBC News that more than 24 U.S. soldiers were wounded in those attacks. And several of those soldiers have reported symptoms of traumatic brain injuries. Also, President Biden today said, "My warning to the Ayatollah was that if they continued to move against our troops, we will respond and he should be prepared." Also, the Marine Corps' top general issued a warning yesterday saying, for those that are in the area, if that Marine Expeditionary Unit has to go in, if you target them, someone else will raise your children. The U.S. yesterday also delivered a stark warning at the UN to Iran, and now the White House says they're sending even more forces to the Middle East. Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that U.S. officials say they have intelligence that Iran is encouraging its terror groups to ramp up attacks on the U.S. Kind of summing all this up, you have one U.S. official saying there are red lights flashing everywhere, so buckle up and follow to stay in the loop.
Despite the hardships, the people of Ukraine show incredible resilience. Their spirit and determination in the face of adversity is an inspiration to us all. The innocent children of Ukraine are bearing the brunt of the conflict. Their childhoods have been shattered, leaving them vulnerable and in need of protection and care.
Everyone's mad at Canada right now. Canada told NATO that it'll never meet the alliance's spending target according to leaked documents, and this is straining relationships with allies. And on this document, Germany says it's concerned about whether Canada can continue to aid Ukraine. Turkey says it's disappointed by Canada's refusal to help them after an earthquake. Hades frustrated by Canada's reluctance to lead an intervention in the country. Latvia and other members are concerned that Canada hasn't increased the number of troops deployed to NATO. NORAD says that Canada lacks Arctic capabilities and hasn't taken any effort to fix that. And when the Pentagon was asked about all this, they basically said, hey, you know, maybe Canada's not doing the best right now, but they're our friends, so buzz off. Follow to stay in the loop.
An F-22 Raptor flew under 2 Iranian jets unnoticed and scared them off with just one sentence. Let me explain. In international airspace near Iran, there was an American MQ-1 drone on a routine surveillance flight. The flight quickly took a turn when 2 Iranian Su-25 jets tried to take down the drone. Luckily, the drone skillfully escaped. However, not long after this, they tried again, but this time in an F-4 Phantom. With the drone only having a top speed of 135 miles per hour, it seemed like it would be easy for the F-4s. Little did they know 2 silent F-22 Raptors were just behind. As the Iranians closed in on their target, they were still oblivious. Taking the opportunity, the F-22s went beneath the F-4 Phantoms using advanced features to assess the planes. Unimpressed with the weapons in their arsenal, the F-22 pilots pulled up quickly to the left, next to the Phantoms. One of the American pilots spoke to them and said, "You really ought to go home."
The humanitarian crisis in Ukraine worsens as fighting intensifies. The Ukraine war spills over into neighboring countries, raising concerns about regional stability. Diplomatic efforts to end the Ukraine war stall as both sides remain entrenched in their positions.
If you think the Abrams is the backbone of NATO's tank power, guess again. The tank, which we will talk about in this episode, has been the basis of the armored power of the West since the days of the Cold War. It's a ferocious cat born to hunt Soviet tanks of the era. It was designed so far ahead of its time that even the formidable American M1 Abrams contains some of its DNA. And almost half a century later, This hunter will have the opportunity to face its long-awaited prey in Ukraine. The Leopard 2 tank, a product of the Cold War, was conceived to counterbalance the formidable armored forces of the Soviet Union, which outnumbered NATO almost 3-1.
The sound of gunfire and explosions fills the air as Ukrainian soldiers gear up for battle. In the war-torn streets of Ukraine, every weapon counts. This rifle is my lifeline. It's my tool for protecting my country and my fellow soldiers. With this grenade launcher, I can take out enemy tanks from a distance. The sound of gunfire and explosions fills the air as Ukrainian soldiers gear up for battle. In the war-torn streets of Ukraine, every weapon counts. This rifle is my lifeline. It's my tool for protecting my country and my fellow soldiers. With this grenade launcher, I can take out enemy tanks from a distance. The sound of gunfire and explosions fills the air as Ukrainian soldiers gear up for battle. In the war-torn streets of Ukraine, every weapon counts. This rifle is my lifeline. It's my tool for protecting my country.
Is this a tank or a rocket launcher? This, in fact, is a Russian heavy flamethrower. But it's not what you think. The Russian heavy flamethrower is made up of a TOS-1A multiple rocket launcher mounted on a T-72 tank chassis and fires thermobaric rockets. In case you're not familiar, a thermobaric weapon is a type of explosive that uses oxygen from the surrounding air to generate a high-temperatured explosion, so they cannot be used underwater, at high altitudes, and in adverse weather. Even though the heavy flamethrower cannot control the rockets once they're launched, they can hit within 32 feet of the target from over 6 miles away. This is accomplished using a laser rangefinder and with help from a ballistic computer to calculate the elevation. The large mass of the launcher and the need for a high level of protection due to its relatively short range resulted in using the chassis of the T-72 main battle tank. The TZM reloading vehicle was built on the chassis of a cross-country truck and is equipped with a crane for loading and unloading of the launcher.
Russia's Belgorod region came under missile attack from the territory of Ukraine on March 17, Russian media reported. Some 17 apartment buildings, 9 houses, and 3 civilian infrastructure buildings were reportedly damaged in the strikes, which were said to have been launched by RM-70 Vampire rocket launchers. Casualties have been reported. It should be noted that starting from March 12, the Freedom of Russia Legion, the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Siberian Battalion comprised of Russians fighting against the Russian army as part of the Ukrainian army, targeted Belgorod region. Russian fighters fighting against Russia claim that the strikes will hit military facilities and the positions of Russian troops. They have demanded the regional administration to evacuate civilians. In addition to the rocket attacks on the territory of the province, ground operations are also carried out with short breaks.